So today morning we're discussing the third and the last session of the topic of if God's will is supreme, then how do we have free will? How do we reconcile human will and divine will? So in the first session I talked about how Krishna determines not our actions but the scope of our actions. Just as the wind, its area of movement is determined by the sky. So God is the cause of all causes but not the cause of all effects. The effects are determined by how individuals use their free will. And then in yesterday's session I talked about when we act, there are three factors involved. There is God's will, free will and evil. Now evil is not some malevolent being existing outside and independent of God. Evil is simply the accumulated impressions of the kind of actions that we have done in the past, which keep prompting us again and again to repeat those actions. So today I'll focus on the theme of how Krishna frees our free will. How Krishna frees our free will. We have free will, but in the first session I differentiated between free will and freedom. Everyone has free will. Even prisoners have free will, but they don't have freedom. They don't have the scope to execute their free will. Now most of us are not in physical prisons, but all of us are conditioned, and conditioning is like a psychological prison. A psychological prison in which we are impelled to desire and act in particular ways, often ways which are detrimental to our best interests. So as souls, we have been given free will, but this free will gets conditioned by how we act. Yesterday I gave the example of how our mind is like a software, and if somebody has repeatedly visited a website, say like Bollywood.com again and again, then even if they now want to visit Bhagavad if they type B, immediately the Bollywood.com comes as a complete in the browser. So now when we are trying to practice bhakti, but still our worldly impressions keep coming to us as propositions for repeating the acts of worldly indulgence that we have done. And the mind's propositions come not only as desires, as temptations to enjoy the world, they also come as fears. This will go wrong, that will go wrong, that will go wrong. On the spiritual path, when we are trying to move, basically there are two forces which can distract us. One is temptation. Oh, you'll get so much pleasure, why are you doing this? Just give this up. And the other is tribulation. You'll get so much trouble if you continue this. Just give this up and then you'll be free from the trouble. Practicing this is causing you so much trouble. So now, when both these are coming, these prompt us, almost we could say push us to act in particular ways. So we're discussing this in the context of Duryodhana's defiance of Krishna's will. Time and time he defied Krishna, and finally he defied Krishna when he refused to accept Krishna's proposal for peace when he had personally come to Hastinapur. So now in this particular verse, the genesis of Duryodhana's antagonism towards the Pandavas is being talked about. So there's a saying, pride comes before a fall. And this is literally illustrated in this particular pastime. So for Yudhishthir, the Maya Danav had made a magnificent palace in which there were many illusory displays. So some places the floor was so smooth, it appeared like there was water over there. And normally if the floor is wet, if our cloth is touching the ground, sari or dhoti or whatever, then we might just lift it a little bit so that it doesn't get wet. So now Duryodhana is walking along, lifting up his cloth, and actually there was no water over there. So when he realized there was no water, he felt embarrassed. And then as he was walking along, he felt his normal ground and there was water and he slipped and fell. And when he fell, Now, yes, falling down in public is not a very pleasant thing. And especially if he fell down because we are not able to pursue things properly, that might be a little funny. But for him, it was not funny. It was humiliating. You say, okay, sometimes you fall down. Are you hurt? He says, nothing except my pride is hurt. We say, when you fall down, we may say like that reply. That means, actually, it's just embarrassing to fall down in public. But often, the amount of pleasure or pain we experience in an event determines how much we are emotionally invested in it. Krishna says in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 21st verse, that action and reaction happen in the material world, at the material level of reality. But happiness and distress are experienced by the soul. Karya karana kartrutve hetuhu prakritiruchyate. Purusha sukha dukkhanam bhoktrutve heturuchyate. So, action reaction, they happen in the material realm. But how much happiness and distress we experience because of a particular action, that is dependent on how much we have the desire to enjoy over there, and how much our consciousness is invested or locked in that particular thing. Maybe a few months ago, there was the Champions Trophy here in England, and India-Pakistan played the finals. And India was expected to win, but India lost and lost very badly. So one boy after that told me, India, that 3 nights after that I couldn't sleep. He says, how could India lose like this? So I told him, probably the cricketers slept. Why couldn't you sleep? So what happened? The consciousness was so locked in that. Even when the match is long over, still it's being replayed. How could he play that shot? Why did he bowl like that? Why did this happen? It just keeps replaying. So now the match is just an event that has happened. But depending on how much consciousness is invested in that event, we experience emotion accordingly. There are players, Sri Lanka lost a series of finals several years ago, T20, World Cup and some other finals. Then when they lost the 3rd time in the final, there were almost half a dozen youth in Sri Lanka who committed suicide. And we say, okay, the team lost, why do you have to commit suicide? But they were so emotionally invested in that, and they felt, oh, our team lost, and they were identifying so much with it that they just ended their life because of that. So, now who is invested in? It's very difficult to know. Invested in is just another way of saying attached to. So now Duryodhana, he fell down. But at that particular point, he was hugely invested in trying to prove his prestige and his greatness to everyone. Duryodhana was born slightly after Yudhishthir. But Yudhishthir lived in the forest with Pandu. So Duryodhana was expected to become the king, because nobody knew whether Pandu was going to come back or not, his sons were going to come back or not. So he became, in what today's language you might call, because he was going to be the king, everybody pampered him, he was the center of the attention. So he became what you could call a spoiled brat. And he had an entitlement mentality. Now, I am going to do an heir, I deserve everything. But when the Pandavas came back, and Yudhishthir was so cultured, so virtuous, so respectful. So the Pandavas, they were Kshatriyas, but they grew up, especially in their formative years, in the forest with the sages. So the oldest among the Pandavas was Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir lived for the longest among the forest sages and Brahmanas. So Yudhishthir had a very Brahminical way of conducting. And naturally, because he was so courteous and polite and respectful, he started winning the hearts of everyone. And in contrast, Duryodhana was insolent and impudent. And he started saying, all the prestige and attention I was getting, now Yudhishthir is getting that. So he already had that insecurity and envy towards Yudhishthir. And now when Yudhishthir performed the Rajasuya Yajna, and he was acknowledged as the emperor of the world. He was already seething with envy. And on top of that, when he was trying to, you think you are so great, I am also great. So at that time, when he fell down, it was not just a physical fall for him. That physical fall represented the finality of his humiliation, the completeness. He was humiliated because people loved Yudhishthir more. He felt humiliated because Yudhishthir had more wealth. He felt humiliated that Yudhishthir had become that Yudhishthir and the Pandavas had got the hand of Draupadi. He felt humiliated in many ways, but now, in front of the Pandavas, in their house, when he fell down, it was unbearable. So, small things are not necessarily small things if we are hugely invested in those things. So, because of this, what happened was, Duryodhana, he just came, somehow I have to get back at the Pandavas. And that's how he conspired to have all of the property robbed, Draupadi dishonored. He felt, I was humiliated, so then I have to humiliate the Pandavas. And for him, humiliating Draupadi, dishonoring her was the way to get back to the Pandavas. It was not just lust over there, it was also a power game when he tried to dishonor Draupadi. But it was not that the Pandavas intentionally were trying to humiliate him. He just fell down over there. There's no intention. Whereas when he tried to dishonor Draupadi, it was completely intentional and malicious. So it is said that hurt people hurt people. When people are hurt, then they hurt others. But when we are hurt, at that time, if we don't process our emotions properly, then our reactions become excessive. Yes, Duryodhana was hurt. And in India, there is a whole school of thought which tries to overturn the traditional narratives. So I was in South India and I met one person. He says, I belong to the RPC. I said, what is RPC? He said, it's the Ravana Protection Committee. What do you mean Ravana Protection Committee? He said, actually Ravana was a good person. But somehow these devotees of Ram have demonized Ravana. So we are going to protect the good name of Ravana. Now, so similarly, there are some people who try to portray that actually Duryodhana was not a bad guy. So they try to say that actually when Duryodhana fell down, so there are some dramatized renditions of the Mahabharata which often spice things up with fictional ideas. So in a popular rendition of the Mahabharata, which is not true, there they depict as if when Duryodhana fell down, Draupadi said, Andhe ka beta andha. And the blind man's son is blind. Now Draupadi never said such a thing. There is absolutely no mention in the Mahabharata of that. And if you look at the overall Mahabharata, her character is also not like that. She is an aggressive lady, but she is not a vengeful lady. She is not a woman who takes pot shots at others. So there everybody laughed, but it was humorous. It was not malicious. But because he was so insecure, he took that laughter as everybody laughing at his humiliation. But the point I'm making is, this was a small incident of hurt, but he made it very big. And he used that as a justification for getting back at the Pandavas. So for all of us, when we feel impelled to do certain things, we all can justify those things. The human mind, or the human intelligence we could say, has been given the power by God or by material nature, whichever we want to say, to justify whatever we want to believe. If I have a desire, to believe something and I strongly want to believe it, then I will find some reason here, some evidence there, and I will somehow justify my belief. Now, whether that belief is based on facts or not, that is secondary. Even in science, which is considered a very objective branch of knowledge, actually there is a lot of subjectivity in which theories are accepted as laws and truths and which are not. Thomas Kuhn is a famous philosopher of science who wrote a book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And there he talks about how there's a lot of extra scientific factors that are involved in which theory gets accepted. So another social critic, he said, the theories that we like, we call them facts. The facts we don't like, we call them theories. So now this is not to demonize science, is not to minimize science also, but the fact is that even in science we can believe whatever we want to believe, and we can come up with evidence to support that idea. So the human intelligence has been given that faculty. So actually, if we look at the existence of God itself, if we objectively look at the world, the case for God is persuasive. There's a lot of order and harmony in the universe, and that order and harmony points to some higher intelligence. However, there are also patches of disorder in the world, and somebody who wants to disbelieve in God, they will just look at the things that seem to be disorderly and say, no, how can God be there? How can God be there? So if we say that the rains are arranged, just see this magnificent system for arranging rains. The sun evaporates water, forms clouds. Now a cloud is like a mobile, seamless, leak-proof water tank, which is made of aircraft-proof technology. And whole aircraft can go through it, nothing happens to it. Even the designers of the Twin Tower could not make aircraft-proof technology. But now so this magnificent design is indicative of some higher intelligence. But atheists will say, okay, if rain were designed for us so that we can have water, then why does it rain on the oceans? Well, it rains on oceans so that atheists can ask this question. So, if we go to a house where there are 100 rooms and 99 rooms are very clean and one room is disorderly, then we can look at either the one disorderly room and say there is nobody looking after this room, or we can look at 99 rooms which are orderly and say there must be someone looking after the room, and there may be some other reason why this room is disorderly. So the point is that we can look at the order in the universe and take it as pointing towards God, and it's a persuasive case, but it is not a decisive case. It's persuasive but not decisive. Why? Again, Krishna has given us free will, and if the free will to either serve God or to turn away from God, and if he made the evidence for his existence totally intellectually compelling, then we would not have the free will to defy him. We would not have scope to execute the free will. So there is some justification for people who want to reject God's existence. So similarly over here, Duryodhana, he got his reason for getting at the Pandavas. He said, justify it. And later on, when Duryodhana is being requested by many of his elders, settle this issue. So you agree for a peace proposal. So at that time, many people tell him, first they try to tell him, even Krishna also persuades him, very rationally, intelligently, kindly. In Vedic tradition there is Sam, Dam, Bhed and Danda. These four are used to persuade people. Sam is, see, both of us have same interest only. Let's work together. Dam is, okay, you want this, you take this, but let's avoid the conflict. Bhed is, if in the opposite party, one person is very adamant, then try to get the others on your side. Then that person says, oh, my part is getting weakened, maybe then they will decree the resistance. Or Danda, you will be punished if you don't agree. So Krishna actually used all of these. At Duryodhana, at that time, he says, why are all of you blaming me? After great introspection, I can't find a single fault in anything that I have done. A single fault. And he was not just, it was a bluff and bluster. He actually believed that he had not done anything wrong. So you did this to me, so I did that to you. So what happens is, when we are hurt, at that time, if our emotions take over, we lose perspective. And then we get back, because we have been hurt, in a very severe and disproportionate way. So because of his insecurity, aggravated by his envy, now he felt totally humiliated. So Krishna himself came to petition, just avoid the war. But he was not ready to listen. So actually, this incident is very indicative of how much God wants us to use our free will well. Although Duryodhana had defied Krishna's devotees repeatedly, still Krishna himself came to Duryodhana. That shows how much God is ready to extend himself to get the soul to use his free will properly, use their free will properly. So imagine that there is some person who is intoxicated, high on alcohol, they're walking along, and they have got a £1 million check with them. Now, they might, because they're so intoxicated, they don't know what they're doing. They might just give that check to anyone. And now, if we are their well-wishers, and at that time we see, hey, this person's got this £1 million check, then we will try to talk with them in some way to somehow gently persuade them so that they hand over that check to us. And then if they handed over the check, we can keep it safely, and then when they're sober, they can use it productively. But if we can't persuade them somehow, then they are going to squander that £1 million without even knowing what they have lost, because they're just drunk right now. So all of us are conditioned souls, and our conditioning is like our intoxication. We are like an intoxicated person, and the £1 million check is our free will. Our free will is our most valuable possession. Even if somebody eventually earns £1 million or £1 billion or £1 trillion, it is because they use their free will intelligently to earn money. And ultimately, it is when we use our free will properly that we attain eternal life, that we attain eternal love for Krishna, and we get eternal joy thereof. And that is far, far more valuable than any treasure of the world. So all of us have this treasure of our free will. But with our intoxication, we may just waste it on anything. So people waste, for example, hours and hours on entertainment. And it's, people say, I don't have time for spiritual life, but they spend so much time on so many trivial things. So what has happened? Whatever they feel, hey, this will give me pleasure, this is good, you start spending hours on it. So the free will is valuable, but under the intoxication of our conditioning, we can just use our free will in utterly useless ways or even self-destructive ways. So Krishna and his representatives come to us, and they somehow try to persuade us to use our free will properly, to use it intelligently for growing ultimately in our spirituality, in our relationship with Krishna. So at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, Vimrishaitad shena yathechasi tatha kuru, and deliberate deeply and do as you desire. So Krishna also essentially told the same thing to Duryodhana, deliberate and do as you desire. But Arjuna and Duryodhana chose opposites. Duryodhana defied Krishna, Arjuna acceded to Krishna. In 18.73, Krishna tells Arjuna, do as you desire. In 18.73, 10 verses later, Arjuna says, I will do as you desire. Karishye vachanam tava. So he voluntarily harmonized his will with Krishna's will. So to the extent we feel inspired to harmonize our will with Krishna's will, to that extent we will have auspiciousness in our life. Now, how do we go about because surrendering to Krishna, doing Krishna's will, or making Krishna's will our will. So for that, basically, there are 3 steps. First is intelligence or intellectual conviction. Jiva Goswami says in the Sandarbhas that for the pure devotees, for the Siddha Bhaktas, it is their preeti that keeps them in Krishna. It is their love for Krishna because of which they stay in Krishna consciousness. But for the sadhakas, the preeti is not there much. We sometimes feel attraction towards Krishna, sometimes we may not feel attraction. What keeps the sadhaka in spiritual life is buddhi, is intelligence. Evam buddhe param buddhva samsthabhyatmanam atmana. Krishna says, in this way, with your intelligence, understanding yourself to be transcendental, practice spiritual life. That's 3.43 in the Gita. So it is our buddhi that is vitally important. If our buddhi is not well nourished, then we will get tempted or distracted by the world. So that's why the whole philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, the discussions in the Srimad Bhagavatam, they are all meant to nourish our buddhi. Now, the buddhi alone cannot act. Although intelligence is important, it is the first step. It is not the complete solution. And the second step is actually application in association. We want to, whatever we learn, this is what I am meant to do. If the intellectual conviction itself is not there, we will be tempted by the world, or we will be allured by threatened by the world, and we will give up the practice of bhakti. So our free will tend to be used, go off in unwanted direction. Just like Bollywood.com pops up on the inner screen. The mind is like an inner browser. It will keep popping up. Come on, do this, do that. So at least we have to have intellectual conviction. Why I should do this and why I should not do that. So, dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Krishna gives us the intelligence by which we can come to him. So, intelligence is not simply intelligence that helps us to move towards Krishna is not simply intellectual. That intelligence is also devotional. The intelligence that inspires, I'm convinced now, this is what I'm meant to do. That intelligence is a gift of Krishna. So then, with that intelligence, we at least know this is what I should do, this is what I should not do. The second step is application. Application in association. Why? This application means, okay, I know I should do this, I don't feel like doing it, but still I will do it. So sometimes, actually Duryodhana himself says this, that Janami dharmam nachame pravrittim, janami adharmam nachame nivrittim. He says, I know what is right, but I don't feel like doing it. I know what is wrong, but I don't feel like giving it up. So, at one level, we have our knowledge, but at another level, we have our likes and dislikes. So, raga dvesha vimuktaistu vishayan indriyaischcharan atmavashyair vidheyatma prasadam adhigachyate. Krishna says, the attachment and aversion will be there, but don't get carried away by it. So, so the application means that once we understand, okay, this is where I'm meant to go, this is what I'm meant to do, then irrespective of how we feel, we continue. Now, how do we do that? So, determination means that we keep our intention above our emotion. Determination means that we keep our intention above our emotion. So, sometimes our emotion will support what we are doing. Sometimes we feel like, yes, we wake up and we're chanting and we get such taste in chanting. We feel chanting should never end. I just want to keep chanting. More often when we start chanting and we feel chanting never ends. It's just going on. Sometimes we take the beads out of the bead bag. Has somebody changed the beads? Instead of 108, are there 1008 beads over here? The rounders are getting over only. So, sometimes our emotions will work for us in our bhakti, and sometimes our emotions will work against us. So, we keep our intention above our emotion. How do we do that? Keep our intention, that's the test of application. which requires determination, is that we keep our intention above our emotion. So how do we do this? By seeing that just as we have an outer environment in which the weather is not in our control, similarly we have an inner environment in which also the weather is not in our control. Some days it may be very cold, some days it may be very hot. Now we acknowledge it is cold, it is hot, but it is not that just because it is cold or it is hot we stop doing the things that are important for us to do. Just because it is cold, I will not cook, I will not go to office, I will not do this, I will not do that. Now if we started waiting for the weather to be good to do the things that are important in our life, we would never do them. Most of the time we would not do them. So just as we acknowledge the weather, but we don't let the weather alone determine our actions. Similarly, we acknowledge our emotional weather, but we don't let it alone determine our actions. Krishna equates the environmental with the emotional in 2.14 when he says Matra sparshastu kaunteya sheet oshna sukha dukkada agamapaino nityastam sitiksha subharatasya. So sheet ushna is environmental, sukha dukkha is emotional. Krishna says both of them are similar. Tolerate them. Now how do we tolerate them? By knowing that they are temporary. They are temporary. When it is extremely cold, when it is extremely hot, when it is stormy, what do we do at that time? If there is a storm, okay, we might slow down, we might temporarily stop, but we know the storm is temporary. We don't have to just give up what we are doing because of the storm. We acknowledge the storm is there, we adjust our actions accordingly, but we keep our purpose going. So sometimes we might just feel terribly low down, depressed, demoralized, disheartened. Nowadays it is a tendency to pathologize all mental problems. So now depression can sometimes be a clinical condition, but quite often depression is just a response to life's distresses. And so there was a social scientist who studied how people respond to depression, and he compared 4 ways of dealing with depression. One was we take antidepressant medicines. The second was people were given placebos, the sugar pills where they told that a medicine, and they found almost the same percentage of people who got cured of depression by taking antidepressants, almost same, but just 0.1% difference was if people just took placebos. So actually it was not the antidepressant which was curing, just the people's feeling, I am taking a medicine, now I will feel better. That made them feel better. And then they found even psychotherapy. Psychotherapy means no medication, just talking with people. You go to psychotherapist and talk with them, that also helped people to improve almost the same degree. And most significantly, it was time. That almost 80% of the people who recovered through our 3 methods, a similar percentage of people recovered from depression simply by time. Because bad things happen, we feel hurt, and life goes on. We say time is the great healer. Things get better. So basically, tam stitiksha swabharata. Yes, there are bad, I feel bad, I feel low, I acknowledge it, but that doesn't mean I stop living the life that I want to live. I perceive it. Sometimes if there's a lot of fog, we may have to move slowly, but we keep moving in the right direction. So this application means that we keep our determination, keep our intention above our emotion. And here association is vitally important, because in our association we get inspired. In whatever association we have, the essence of association is not just physical proximity. The essence of association is the transfer of desires. Is when we associate somebody who loves to chant holy names, they are enthusiastic in kirtan. Just by seeing their enthusiasm, we get the enthusiasm. So our desires are not just linear, they are also triangular. Triangular means that if I am here and I see some object and I desire it, that's a linear desire. So we may say a new smartphone, I think I want to buy it, that's a linear desire. But there are so many new models of smartphones which keep coming in. So then the smartphone companies, they may get a celebrity to endorse the smartphone. I use this smartphone. Say a sports star, a movie star, they endorse it and they say, people, oh, you take it, I also want to take it. So what has happened? The smartphone is here, we are here. the third person is here. So our desire is not just linear, it is triangular. When we see somebody else doing something, then we desire to do it. A few years ago, when the first time I had gone to Australia, the devotees there offered me baklava. Now I had not heard of what is a baklava. It's Arabian sweet. I didn't know this. Would you like to have baklava? I said, maybe later. And then there was a devotee with me also who was taking prasad. He got the baklava and he was eating it. He was eating with such taste. Much delicious. Okay, give me one also. So, just hearing about baklava or seeing baklava didn't create the desire. But then seeing somebody taking it, okay, give me also. So similarly for us, how many of us, we just got a Bhagavad Gita and we fell in love with it. And a few of us might be there, there's very special souls. But most people take Bhagavad Gita as it is and keep it as it is. It is only when we associate with devotees. It is only when we associate with devotees, we hear some class on the Bhagavad Gita. Hey, there is so much in the Gita, I didn't know. And especially if you associate some devotees who love to recite the Gita, love to speak on the Gita, have fresh realizations from the Gita, then I want to read it also. So basically, the association is what stimulates our desires. And especially in spiritual life, this is true because in material life, the sense objects appear attractive. So the desire might get stimulated. But in spiritual life, the sense objects are attractive, but they may not appear all that attractive. The Bhagavad Gita, yes, it's an attractive book, but we may not fall exactly in love with it or looking at the book. But by associating with those who are devoted to the Gita, we become devoted to the Gita. So first step is conviction. Now these are not, let's say, linear steps, because even in association we can get conviction. But we're talking about, there's conviction, then there's application. And then when there is consistent application, there will be purification. And purification means that the unwanted impulses, unwanted propositions that keep coming in the mind, they just stop coming. So, like if Bollywood.com was popping up on our screen, even if we type B, we want to go to Bhagavad Gita, Bollywood keeps coming on. But if we keep choosing Bhagavad Gita, then afterwards, Bollywood stops coming. Or sometimes like my computer might just go into the settings, look at what are the preferences and just delete Bollywood.com. Now there is no delete button for the mind. We can delete things from our computer browser, but the impressions stay in the mind. However, what Krishna does is, when we practice bhakti, he gives us such powerful spiritual impressions that the worldly impressions just go so far into the background that they are as if forgotten. And when purification happens, then there is no lower proposition coming up from the mind. And that's the time when bhakti becomes joyful. Now when we become pure, when our mind becomes pure, then our spiritual life becomes secure. Till that point there is insecurity, because the temptations are coming, they will drag us away. But once we become pure, there are no longer the temptations coming. Then we just secure and steadily we march towards Krishna. And we all have experienced some amount of purification. Some of us might have been eating meat earlier. But now, if we are traveling in a train or a plane and we see somebody eating meat, how many of us have to resist the temptation to eat meat? Prasadam is very practically the higher taste. So, although that proposition might have been coming to the mind earlier, now it doesn't come. So that means bhakti does work. So right now it may appear as if there is a lot of struggle, but that struggle is not lifelong, or not, that struggle is not eternal. As we keep practicing bhakti, the struggle will keep decreasing. And I talk about these three steps: conviction, application and purification. These are from our side, we are trying to do it. But from his side, Krishna is also trying to help us. So I'll conclude with 2 points about how Krishna helps us. First is that Krishna, he unconditionally is always with us. Even if we make mistakes, even if we do something wrong, even if we fall down, Krishna never abandons us. Krishna is always there with us, eager to help us. Now Krishna is not a judgmental God who is waiting to catch us when we do wrong. Hey, you did that wrong, I'll punish you. No, Krishna is there to catch us when we fall. When we fall, He is there to catch us and lift us up and again come back to Him. So, in the Vishnu Sahasranam, there are two names of Krishna which are given, of Vishnu that are given, that seem to be contradictory. Gurur Gurutamo, Animisho Nimisha, Swagri Vachas Patirudaradhi, Animisha and Nimisha. So Animisha means one who never blinks his eyes. Nimisha means one who blinks his eyes. So why are two contradictory names used? Baldev Vidyabhushan has written a commentary on the Vishnu Sahasranam, the 1000 names of Vishnu, and there he says that Animisha means that if a devotee is trying to serve the Lord unblinkingly notes even the smallest service that is being done. And he says if a devotee somehow commits a mistake while doing service, while serving Him, then the Lord blinks His eyes and overlooks the mistake. The Lord blinks His eyes and overlooks the mistake. So he gives the example that the example is Putana. When she came to kill Krishna, Krishna just saw that, oh, she has a maternal mood, she has come to offer her milk to me. Krishna closed his eyes. Because she had a malevolent intention, she got the reaction, she lost her body. But she got the kingdom of God. So Krishna delivered her. At one time when Krishna had come to meet the Pandavas, at that in Hastinapur, Krishna was cutting some fruits and the knife slipped from his hand and his hand got cut, finger got cut. So Draupadi was nearby. When she saw that, she just came running and she pulled off a piece of her silk sari and started bandaging Krishna. And she was in anxiety seeing the blood. But Krishna was just calm and smiling. He said, Draupadi, you have given me this sari, I will remember and repay you. And when did he repay her? During the dishonoring, when he offered her unlimited garments. So Krishna's love for us is unconditional. That unconditional love does not mean that whatever we do, He loves us. That's one thing. And whatever we do, He loves that. They're two different things. Whatever we do, Krishna still loves us. But it's not that whatever we do, Krishna loves that. There are right things. When we say Krishna's love is unconditional, that does not mean that whatever we do, He will love that. There are right things and there are wrong things. There are things which help us spiritually grow and there are things which cause us spiritually to regress. So Krishna doesn't want us to do the things that cause us to spiritually go down. But even if we do that, He still loves us. So the second example is of Google Maps. Suppose we are going from, today morning, I came from Leicester here. So we use Google Map. So suppose Google tells us turn left. And suppose we turn right at that. Then what does Google do? Immediately Google reroutes. And it tells us, okay, now you take this path. If again we take a wrong turn, again Google will reroute, again will tell us the right path. So no matter how many wrong turns, Google will keep rerouting and tell us the way from there. So Krishna is like that ultimate Google. So no matter how many wrong turns we take, Krishna will reroute and will give us the path. Okay, from here you turn back and move on. From here you turn back and move on. So we may have committed many mistakes in the past and we may even commit mistakes in future because we are finite beings, we are fallible beings. But we don't need to beat ourselves up with the mistakes, for the mistakes. Just start off, okay, whatever mistake has happened, now let me do course correction and move on. The mistakes are not trivial. The mistakes will have the consequence. If I take a wrong turn, it will take me that much longer to reach the destination. Every wrong turn means it will take longer to reach the destination. So in that sense, the mistakes have consequences. But we are never, if we have good Google Maps, then we are never lost. We may not be exactly getting to the destination on time, but there's always a way to the destination. Similarly, no matter how much our conditioning is, no matter how many past things we have done wrong, we are never lost to Krishna. We are never lost to Krishna. He always has a plan for us from wherever we are to come to Him. So just as physically, if you have taken a wrong turn, then we just start beating ourselves up. Why did I take the wrong turn? Why did I take the wrong turn? Why did I take the wrong turn? Some friend with us will say, okay, you took the wrong turn, doesn't matter. Now at least take the right turn and go back. So similarly for us, even if we have done some things wrong in the past, even if our conditionings will make us do something wrong in the future, but still right now, let us take the right turn. Right now, Krishna has a plan for us. And if we follow His plan, if we just try to serve Him to the best of our capacity, He will keep us on the track to Him. And in that way, from wherever we are, we can attain Krishna. That is the meaning of Krishna's inclusive, unconditional love. And even He doesn't want us to commit mistakes, but even if we commit mistakes, still Krishna loves us. How does Krishna free our free will? By giving us intelligence, intellectual conviction, by giving us the association, the facility to apply what we are doing, and by purifying our hearts. And most importantly, by always being with us, pointing to us the right choice. And if we keep making the right choice, even in a small way, we keep moving towards Krishna. And ultimately, these small steps, we just keep taking one every day. We just do a little bhakti, little bhakti, little bhakti. The process is evolutionary. It's a small, gradual process. But the result is revolutionary. The result is dramatic. Now, if we just keep practicing bhakti, our heart which is attached to the world will become attached to Krishna. And when our love for Krishna becomes greater than the love for the world, then Krishna will take us out of the world to His eternal abode. So I'll summarize. I spoke today about how Krishna frees our free will. I started by talking about Duryodhana elaborately, how because of his insecurity and envy and his entitlement mentality, he took a small hurt and made it disproportionate. So hurt people. And when we are hurt, our emotions make us lose perspective and we may become disproportionately malevolent. So for all of us, Duryodhana, Krishna is personally going to Duryodhana to try to persuade him to choose the right course of action. That demonstrates how much God wants each soul to use the free will properly. So the conditioned soul is like an intoxicated person with $1 million check. So somehow the intoxicated person has to be told to give the check to a trustworthy person, a well-wisher. So similarly, somehow Krishna tries to persuade us to use our free will properly. And how can we, if we understand we have conditionings which impel us in the wrong direction, how can we learn to use our free will properly? Right now, our free will is there, but it is conditioned. We are like in a psychological prison. But how do we free our free will? The first step is conviction. It is the intelligence, buddhi, that will keep us on the spiritual platform. At least by philosophy, understand this is what this is good and this is what I should do. This is not good. This is what I should not do. Then you have to apply it. Application requires determination. Determination means we keep our intention above our emotion. We acknowledge our emotions. I feel like doing it. I don't feel like doing it. But we treat our emotional situation like our environmental, ecological situation. It's like a weather. We modify our actions, but we don't let the weather determine our actions. And similarly, emotions don't have to determine our actions. And lastly, there's purification, where the unwanted promptings stop coming. Then, when our mind becomes pure, our spiritual life becomes secure. And through it all, Krishna is there. Every small service that we do, He unblinkingly notes and rewards. And the mistakes that we make, He just blinks and overlooks them. So Krishna is like the Google map. No matter how many wrong turns we take, it reroutes and gives us the right path. So if we just, from wherever we are, whatever we may have done in the past, whatever we may do in the future, right now, we just try to serve Krishna. And if we keep taking small steps towards Krishna, according to what we can do right now, the process is evolutionary, but the result will be revolutionary. When by the steady application of bhakti, our love for Krishna becomes greater than our love for the world. Krishna will take us out of the world to His eternal abode. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So, any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. I guess this is the final discourse that you get. Thank you for the 3 sessions. I have a question. So the Bhagavatam, we will learn that Narada Muni, when he instructs Dhruva Maharaj about have to approach three different classes of people. The intelligent one, you serve them. The peers, you make friendship. And the less intelligent, you are compassionate.
Yeah.
And probably the purport said, we should never deride the less intelligent. That's what
we should never
deride. That's the mistake we make. The intelligent one, instead to serve them, we envy them. And the peers, we challenge them. And the less intelligent, instead of being compassionate, we deride them. And my question is this. Now, Pandavas, Draupadi, very cultural lady. Here there is a situation that the old battle of Kurukshetra is there in the Mahabharata. That when he fell in the water, Draupadi, instead of showing some compassion, but she laughed and derided. Even a Yudhishthira didn't like it, because here is my cousin, and you're deriding me. They had to stop her from laughing. And this is the reason why Duryodhana took such an insult to his heart that he vowed to destroy the Pandavas.
Yeah.
Now, was that Krishna's arrangement, or was just something that because you said the old class was about always be rational above emotions, or was she ruled by emotions?
Okay.
To deride.
Okay, yeah, good question. So Draupadi laughed at Duryodhana when he fell down. So why did she deride him at that time when Yudhishthira didn't like that? See, everyone has their personality, and there are certain reactions that are just instinctive. Bhima and Yudhishthira, you cannot have two brothers who are more different than each other. Yudhishthira was very pacifist, try to have peace. Bhima would be itching for a fight, just itching, looking for an opportunity. So everybody has their personality. And now, as I mentioned also, they laughed, but the laughter was not mocking. It is just instinctive. It was that it can come off to someone who is insecure as mocking. But we have to look at the overall life of a person to see how they are living. So that means that in certain situations, certain reactions might just be instinctive. Say, if we are in a class and we are late night, we are tired, we might just yawn at that time, or we might just nod off. Now that doesn't necessarily mean we are being deliberately disrespectful to the speaker. The speaker may say, I am speaking, why are you sleeping? Well, from the speaker's perspective, it's one thing, but there's always a context and a background. So we could say that whole combination was unfortunate, that Duryodhana fell at that place and Draupadi laughed at him. But if we look at the overall character of Draupadi, she was not a person who, as I said, was malicious. She had her own life. She didn't either way care for Duryodhana in a negative way or in a positive way. She had her husband, she had her life, she had her children. At that time she didn't have, but later on she would have. So it was not that she was deriding. And even if, for argument's sake, the epics we can see at different levels. In the Vedanta Brahma Sutra Bhashya, Madhvacharya says that the epics, Itihasas and the Ramayana, they can be understood at three levels: the literal, the ethical, and the metaphorical. So literal means just this is a story, hearing it will purify us. Ethical means, look, this is the right course of action, this is the wrong course of action. And metaphorical means that there are deeper significances to it. So of course he is careful, the metaphorical is not to be taken at the expense of the literal, but in addition to the literal. So from the ethical perspective, we could say that if we want to argue that way, that okay, Draupadi should not have laughed at that point. But again, even if that is a mistake, there is a sense of proportion. The sense of proportion. See, one of the principles of justice is that the punishment has to be proportionate to the crime, not proportionate to how angry people feel about it. So if we see, Parikshit Maharaj committed a mistake when he put the dead snake around Shamikrishi. But to be sentenced to die for that, that is outrageously disproportionate. So for Draupadi, even if we say for that argument's sake that Draupadi committed a mistake, then for Duryodhana what he did was way too disproportionate. So there is this whole system, there is the whole concept of blaming the victim. That, you did that because of which I did this. I was at one place and then there was this temple, the manager was there, he was very domineering. And everybody was complaining that, he just shouts at us, insults us. And then when I talked with him, his answer was, if they did what I told them to do, I wouldn't have to shout at them. So, rather than saying that, okay, acknowledge that I shouldn't be shouting, but he says, they are not doing it, that's why I'm shouting. Well, even if they don't do it, there's a way to speak. So what happens is, sometimes we have our conditionings and other small actions becomes triggers for us to vent out the way we want to vent out. And then we justify, because they did it, so I did this. So, yesterday I talked about the trigger and the cause. Now, so we could say Draupadi and the Pandavas laughing was the trigger. But the cause was Duryodhana's envy in his own heart. And we can learn from our perspective rather than, generally in scriptures the characters are exalted. So rather than passing a judgment about those characters, a safer stand is that we learn that this is what we should not do. If somebody has fallen down, we shouldn't laugh at them. That's what we can learn. Now there's another perspective to this whole thing is that when in the Krishna book, also in the Bhagavad, it is said that when people laughed at Duryodhana's falling, Yudhishthira tried to stop them, but Krishna remained silent. So Krishna remained silent means what? That
he proved it. He proved it. He didn't just remain silent. He showed approval.
Okay, he approved it. So what this means is that actually the nature of the world is yethamam prapadyante. As all people surrender to me, I reward accordingly. So if we want to go towards Krishna, Krishna will open doors to come towards him. If you want to go into illusion, Krishna will open doors for that also. So if somebody wants to be tempted, they will see all around them tempting objects. If somebody wants to be envious, everything around they will see as reason for envy. If I want to hate someone, I will just find out, they did like this, they did like that, they did like that. I will just selectively focus on that and I will hate them. So Krishna reciprocates with our desires. So we could say that it was all Krishna's plan, but it was not that Krishna wanted Duryodhana to become malevolent, but Duryodhana had his free will. And because he wanted to be malevolent, because he wanted to be envious, he just took that as a justification and he moved forwards. So yes, to conclude this point, that rather than seeing that, we can see at one level it is Draupadi's mistake, another level we see it's Krishna's plan. But for us, for practical application, we can see that, yeah, sometimes people may take offense at small things also. So it's best to try to be careful. Okay? Thank you.
So would you agree that, the point that I understood by reading the Mahabharata, that, I don't know if you agree with me, that ultimately was the contributing factor was treated by Krishna, the power of the providence to actually,
okay.
to actually
this is okay.
behave like that because he wanted the war.
Okay, so was it that, okay, this is a good question.
If you look at the next report,
okay.
Next verse.
Okay, I'll come to that.
I just want to finish this point.
Yeah.
When he delivered the message of peace externally, it was very persuasive. To Duryodhana, we should not fight. This is immoral, that's Dharma. But the same Krishna within the heart of Duryodhana was empowering him to don't surrender, don't give in, to war. The heart said the peace proposal And Krishna
Okay.
in the heart of Duryodhana was
Okay.
he had the
Yeah.
upper hand.
I-
So
I-
he did the same thing in the heart of Draupadi. Because,
Okay.
just a few days ago there was a lady, she fell down with like the Maharashtra, the wife of which I can't remember the name. But nobody laughed. All the devotees were there to help. It's a culture thing. To not, if someone
Okay.
is in trouble, you don't laugh. You don't deride that person, but you help.
Okay, yeah. So can we say ultimately that it is Krishna's plan that he wanted the war to happen? That's why he made Draupadi laugh, and that's why even when he externally went as the Shanti Dut, he inside Duryodhana's heart did not let him accept it. See, this is one way of looking at it, definitely. I would say that it is not always true all the time. Is it that Krishna wanted the war to take place? Is it that Krishna wanted everyone, or the thousands and thousands of people to be killed at that time? Well, Krishna has given every one of us his free will. And we could say ultimately that it is not, without Krishna's sanction nothing happens. But Krishna's sanction is one thing, Krishna's intention is another thing. So is it that Krishna deliberately wanted Duryodhana to fight and the war to take place? Well, at one level you could say yes, because the Mahabharata does talk about it. This is a whole subject, I'll just briefly explain it. That before the Kurukshetra war, Vyasa, Vidura, all of them tell Dhritarashtra that stop your son from fighting this war. At that time Dhritarashtra says that if the war is destined, what can I do? He says, so at that time Vidura says destiny determines the consequences of our actions, not our actions themselves. So destiny determines the consequences of our actions, not our actions themselves. And he asks Vyasadeva also that is this war destined? So Vyasadeva says the ways of destiny are very difficult to understand, O king. We should focus on doing what is our duty. But the same Vyasadeva, after the war is over and Dhritarashtra is in lamentation, all my 100 sons are killed. At that time Vyasadeva tells him that, O king, do not lament, this whole war was destined. Now, was the war destined or was it not destined? The important thing is that rather than thinking of destiny as something absolutely frozen, this is how it has to happen, we have to see that destiny is also reciprocal. So, if something has already happened, the philosophy, there is philosophy and there is purpose of philosophy. The purpose of the philosophy is to help us make wise choices, to help us move towards Krishna. In the 10th canto, when Kamsa is about to lop off the head of Devaki, Vasudeva uses various arguments to try to stop Kamsa. And one of the arguments he uses is, O Kamsa, death is destined. And if you are going to die, you are going to die. What will you gain by killing a woman, killing a sister on her wedding day? It's like you can say sin square and sin cube. So now he could have turned around, Vasudeva could have turned around the argument and says that if Devaki is destined to die, then she is destined to die. Why am I trying to stop Kamsa? He doesn't think like that. But because for Vasudeva, as a husband, it is his duty to protect his wife. And he will do his duty whatever the destiny may be. But for Kamsa, he is going completely against his duty to attack Devaki. So at that time he is being reminded of destiny. So the point which I am making is, the whole Vedic culture, Vedic wisdom is duty centered, not destiny centered. So we in retrospect can say this was destiny. In retrospect, Dhritarashtra told it was destiny. Now don't lament about it. Now focus on doing your duty. Now at least become dharmic. Now become spiritual. But in prospect, before the war was going to take place, Vidura told him, now use your intelligence to understand what is your duty and do that. So before giving a class, if I think, okay, whatever I speak, whatever question answers happen, it's all destiny. Well, then I will not prepare for the class properly. when I was 25 years ago, when I started giving classes for the first time, I was given some guidelines. So the 10th guideline was depend on Krishna. But in bracket, depend on Krishna, but only after you have prepared. So if after I prepare, I give a class and still some controversy happens, this goes wrong, that goes wrong, then I can say that it was destiny. But before I do that, I don't prepare only, and then I speak something wrong, it causes controversy. That is not destiny. That is my responsibility. So therefore, we could say in retrospect that it was Krishna's destiny. That same Krishna within Duryodhana's heart did not let him understand. But I would say that it is not Krishna who is responsible. It is Duryodhana who is responsible. Because Duryodhana had the desire to defy Krishna, so Krishna reciprocated by giving him that conviction. Oh no, what you're saying doesn't make sense. If he had even a small desire to know the truth, then Krishna would have given him that. So it's just, Krishna is the ultimate doer, we could say, but Krishna is not necessarily the immediate doer of everything. It's people who use their free will and they do certain things. Okay? Thank you. Okay, one last question, then we can have one-to-one question after. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhupada. How do we know what Krishna
Like,
is?
1 minute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Krishna, thank you, Prabhupada. How do we know what Krishna's will are for us? Every time in our lives we have to make choices, and
Okay.
sometimes it's not clear, even though we are trying to follow the path of bhakti. And how, you said about sanctioning and intending. How do I align myself with Krishna's intention?
Okay. So how do we know what is Krishna's will for us? It is, again, not necessary that Krishna's will is one line. Krishna's will can also be a broad path, along which there can be different lines. I'll explain what I mean by this. That when we talk about Krishna's will, it is not that Krishna's will means Krishna is like a robot programmer who wants us, this is the program I written for you, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. It's not like that. Krishna has given us free will. And when we are meant to do Krishna's will, that doesn't mean that we have no individuality left. We still have our individuality, we still have our personality, and we also make choices. But there could be choices, so rather than thinking Krishna's will as one action, we could say Krishna's will is like a circle, within which there could be many actions that could be done, which could be Krishna's will. So we could say that the broad circle of Krishna Bhakti is Krishna's will. Now, in Krishna Bhakti, whether I have some time to read Shastra, whether I read the Bhagavad Gita or I read the Bhagavatam or I read the Chaitanya Charan. Now, it is not that Krishna has a will that I should read only Bhagavad Gita and not Chaitanya Charan. Not like that. Even following Krishna's will doesn't mean becoming robots who have to just go along a preordained path. It means that we stay within the perimeter of in the circumference of serving Krishna. And there are different ways of serving Krishna also. So having said that, now it is, how do we know Krishna's will at every moment? It is not so easy to know. And as I said, it's not that Krishna has a pre-programmed path for each at every moment. Rather, there are broad things in our life which will direct the trajectory of a life towards Krishna. If, like for example, associating with devotees, chanting the holy names, practicing sadhana, practicing bhakti yoga. If in these big things in our life, we do what Krishna has told us to do, through Guru Sadhu Shastra, then by that, we show Krishna that we want to do His will. So if we consider there are three situations in our life, one situation where we clearly know what is Krishna's will. Say for example, Krishna wants us to practice bhakti. Second situation where we're not really sure, should I do this or should I do that? Third situation where nothing is clear, what I should do. So if in the situations where it is clear to us what Krishna would want us to do, and Krishna wants us to practice bhakti. So if in those situations we do Krishna's will, then we are showing Krishna that we want to follow His will. And when we show Him that, He will reciprocate by guiding us where things are unclear. So it's not that we do whatever we want whenever we want, and then when we want we take Krishna's will. Now there is a process. So rather than worrying about the situations when Krishna's will is unclear for us, we focus on the situations when Krishna's will is clear, and at least do Krishna's will at that time. And then, after having said that, in general, if we strive to come to the mode of goodness, then Sattvat Sanjayate Jnanam, the mode of goodness gives knowledge. In the introduction to the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada writes that when we come to the mode of goodness, and how to advance further will be revealed from within. So when we practice sadhana bhakti and come to the mode of goodness, then our inner compass, we all have an inner compass, which is do this, don't do this. That inner compass in the mode of passion or ignorance gets distorted. But as we come to goodness, it becomes more and more harmonized with Krishna. And then we just get to say, this is what I should do, this is what I should not do. And of course, for major decisions in our life, we need to consult our spiritual master or our spiritual guides. And also, the major decisions that we are to do in our life, rather than doing them when we are in the mode of passion or ignorance, we try to do them when we are in goodness. So it is not that when we say that we should follow our duty, we should do our duty, or we should serve Krishna, we should do God's will. It is not that there is some exhaustive karma handbook which is there, exhaustive karma handbook which tells in every possible situation what we are meant to do. And as soon as the situation comes, immediately in our mind we Google, okay, what should I do in this situation? It's not like that. There is no exhaustive karma handbook like that. What is there is that when we practice the principles of bhakti, as we practice them more and more, we internalize them, then our inner compass becomes more and more harmonized with the direction which points towards Krishna. And in every situation, we will take decisions which are more and more harmonious with Krishna's will. And even if we take some decision which is disharmonious, we will realize it soon and we will do course correction. So if we start thinking that in every situation I will wait till I learn what is Krishna's will and then I'll act, then we will never act only. So we have to do the best we can with the knowledge that we have in the circumstance that we are in, and gradually we learn. Okay, and this was the right decision. This was not necessarily the right decision. We could have done course correction. So basically, first by doing what we can, doing a Krishna's will when we know what it is, and overall trying to cultivate the mode of goodness, will harmonize our life with Krishna's will. Thank you very much. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Prabhupada ki.